All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show. This is episode 51. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by my buddy Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, what's up, man? How are you doing, sir?
No, I'm all right. I actually did watch that Twins game tonight, and
Too bad for
I
you.
think it. I think I got to see a lot of what you guys have been enjoying when you've had time to watch baseball over the last couple of weeks, where they tease a little bit and then they blow it at the end. So hey, there's still
And
time. Be optimistic. There's still time. I got my playoff tickets. I'm ready to go, and we'll see if I just get a giant refund.
you know, Jeremy, the fact that you're the optimist in the group around playoff chances at this point is making me maybe a little bit worried about how things are going to roll out down the stretch here. But we will have to wait and see how it plays out, man. Anyway, we're gonna keep the small talk small today because we have a guest. We started wrapping up the Twins minor league system. They're very successful year in 2024 on our pod last week. We will get back to that next week, but today we have a really exciting guest. We are thrilled to be joined by Shooter Hunt, who is a vice president of scouting at Prep Baseball. Shooter, what's up, man? How are you? And thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you guys for having me. I mean, we can just talk Twins baseball. I just watched the game as well. I love their draft from this year. And come on, they got a couple games up on the Tigers right now. They'll be okay.
Okay, we need that, Shooter. We need that level of optimism. Yeah, tell us your thoughts on their 2024 draft, man. What was the read from your end on Culpepper and Kyle DeBarge and all those guys they ended up taking?
I mean, just grabbing those athletes up front was awesome. I thought Culpepper was a great pick. DeBarge, you guys are going to love. It's just an absolute gamer, blue collar, gets after it all over the diamond. He's going to win hearts of everybody. And then there's a high school lefty, Dason Hill, who really blew up at our All-American game last year. Texas kid who he has a chance to be special. So I think that's one to really jump up the system and get a big time arm who could blow up the next couple of years.
Yeah, right on. Shooter, you're like filling me with positive vibes and good energy already. I know Hill is definitely the guy who we talked about the most as like, we know that the Twins are going to be conservative with prep arms and probably not have them throw. They're going to go to instructs. They're going to go to velo camp, all that good stuff. And we're going to have to wait to 2025. But I do feel like he is going to be one of the most hotly anticipated debuts for prospect hounds. Just the kind of like lanky frame, lefty, seems like he has really good stuff that ticked up in the spring already. Cannot wait to see him debut.
And the makeup, he's not scared. He's got a little swagger to him. That's awesome. But I almost forgot, like, you guys have Walker Jenkins. You're set. You're good. Like, let's be real.
Yeah. Yes. Life on Twins farmland is very good at the moment. So it's been a super fun year. But we organized this connection with you through Parker, a mutual connection, and we really want to dig in with you on player evaluation and specifically the prep side of player evaluation. So we're going to spend a ton of time digging into kind of your approach to evaluation, what you look for specifically with prep high school guys. We'll probably ask you for some of your thoughts on this 2024 draft class, maybe dig into 2025. But before we do all that, we got to start with a little bit of background, because we definitely have some young folks who listen to this podcast who might not be as familiar with you as we are. So, Shooter, could you talk a little bit about your journey, your pathway in baseball from being a player, from being drafted to being involved on the kind of evaluation side and to what you do now? Just give us a little bit of that pathway, if you won't mind.
Yeah, I think something to be said about just being involved in baseball for so long, for watching it growing up, played baseball in college, was lucky to be drafted by the Twins in the first round back in 2008. From there, that didn't make the big leagues, but went back to college. I was a coach at Tulane University before pivoting over to prep baseball. The role our president, Sean Duncan, this role evolved over time. And I was able to step into it, right place, right time, probably some luck involved with the summer prior to taking this job. And the growth has been immense. But I think the biggest thing with scouting and just being within baseball is just seeing as much as possible. I grew up as the son of a coach, grandson of a coach, just from an athletic family with lots of baseball background. So I think that's really helped. That's just really been innate for me to go watch a game. And so much comes down to being able to sit there, watch, and concentrate. But I always like to say, like, the more you go out and see, the better you'll get. Go watch as many games as you can. I'm sure you guys could break down Major League Baseball better than I could right now. Who is this guy? I don't know who that is. Now, I can tell you probably every high school player in the country, but when it comes to the big leagues, I might be a little bit behind you guys because you watch so much of it.
Yeah. And Shooter, that's a nice segue into kind of what we wanted to ask you about next, right? Which is that it seems like there is so much more spotlight on the amateur game in a great way now, like the accessibility to college baseball on TV, the kind of explosion of data for college and prep guys and the availability of it. I'm curious, because you've been at prep baseball for a while now, what about player evaluation has changed during your time there, if anything? Or is it something that you still approach in the same in a really consistent way that you always have?
I think you always go back to the roots, and a smart scout that I've known, just find athletes who are aggressive with some aptitude. So those athletic guys who move right, they're aggressive at the plate. They're not scared, but they also can make those changes. They have that aptitude to adjust. Now that we have all this technology, there is a learning curve for a lot of those guys to come in and understand what they're able to do. But I think going to the yard, for the most part, you're seeing the same things you may have seen 50 years ago. Hey, that guy looks right. That's a term that most guys use. That looks right. There's something different about that. What hits you in the face? Hey, this guy's really good. When you go watch Joe Mauer for the first time and he's a sophomore or junior in high school, he looks different. When you go to the field and you see Trevor Larnach hit, that looks different. Max Kepler, who's in Europe, wherever he would have been, in Germany, hey, this looks different. He moves right. And I think that the technology has just really allowed us to quantify what the eyes are seeing, right? So, like, this is a good player. Hey, here are the traits of his fastball, his spin rate, his access, the induced vertical. Oh, man, that guy hits the ball hard. Well, now we can see his exit velocities, right? You know he hits the ball hard. So I think whether it's StatCast, TrackMan, going on Baseball Savant and finding out what these guys are doing, it really, what we've been seeing for the last 100+ years, we just have better tech to tell us, oh, yeah, you are seeing right.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought up the tech piece, because I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit too. How do you marry the tech with what you see? Do you rely on the eye test first and then stack up the data around what you see, or is there another approach that you have there? And you talked a little bit about how much is available now. We have bat speed data and swing plane data and so many things. What do you think kind of the next frontier is here for player data for amateur baseball? What are we going to see next that we don't see much of right now?
Well, I think the biggest thing with this data is just not to get overwhelmed. I'm a huge believer in the bell curve, right? You can't just say no tech. You can't be all tech. There was a while where I thought, hey, there's going to be a chance, even before some teams did it, that guys will not even go to the field. They will get data. They can see it on TV. They will get all these metrics and be able to make a decision. Now, I do think that everything comes in cycles, and the game's kind of cycling back to, hey, we need to check in on this makeup. What does this kid have? Does he have that drive to become better? Because you are kind of buying a future on what those players may be. So I don't think you can go too far either way. For me, I love the data kind of as this is covering my back, right? I got to see this. I liked what this kid was about. Let's check into what else do I have in here that may quantify my correctness or question my bias. So that's something that I'm really in tune to, or a game that I'm not at, and I have to go, where am I planning my trip to? Well, this data is going to come in, and this kid has great data. Maybe I need to go out and see him first, and I'll circle back to these other guys, because time is finite, and you really have to make those right decisions from that aspect. But there are definitely guys, I'm very intrigued by it, because there's certain people, you have your biases ingrained in baseball. So I have those innate biases where, hey, I'm going to miss something. And I'm always curious to ask people who are not involved in baseball, who do you like? What do you see in this? Just because they're not jaded by anything from that standpoint. And then to go back into the data and say, like, I didn't like this swing. Well, he's got great bat speed, whatever the blast motion metrics may have on it or the exit velocities. Let me reconsider. Maybe I was wrong here, but it's just something to really protect your back.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, because I feel like when Jamie and I talk, and he's always throwing numbers at me, and I love numbers. Do you have like data biases? For me, it's like when Jamie starts talking about in zone swing and miss, like that to me is one of those where I'm like, that's going to be concerning. And I love to compare like strikeouts and walks, and that's something we talked about a lot too. Like if guys are walking more than they're striking out, I feel like that's gonna be good moving forward. Are there anything that you know about yourself where you're like, this is a bias that I have where I'm looking for certain things or I'm not looking for certain things?
I would say as a pitcher, the biggest bias, and having been a pitching coach too, the biggest bias for me is more so like the secondary offerings. To me, it's a bit harder to teach a breaking ball than it is for a fastball velocity, right? We talked about velocity camp, just going out there for 17, 18-year-old, eating more cheeseburgers, getting stronger, adding some mass. You will probably throw harder just naturally throughout progression versus do you have the touch to be able to develop a plus breaking ball, which Jason Hill does already have. So get excited about that. So like that's probably for me the biggest bias. Like I want to have a guy and see his spin metrics. I know teams have already brought in the Edgertronic cameras, so they're slowing down even with prep pitchers. How are his fingers working on the ball? Because a lot comes down to player development. We're in a golden age of player development. The Twins, when they transfer over to the new regime, like that was a huge deal for them to get the player development side caught up. And they've done a great job with that thus far. So if your player development department can develop something, you don't need to pay for that, right? So you're looking for things that you cannot develop because that is expensive. We can't do that. He has it. Let's take him. We'll do the rest. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. And you talked about the in zone misses, guys who can get whiffs, guys who can tell you what's coming and still get a swing and miss. Like it's rare at the big league level. And that's why those guys get paid so much money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's move on and talk about prep high school players specifically, because I will kind of, I feel like, own a bias we have on this podcast, right? Which is that we will lean more college when we're in our draft build up, when we're profiling guys. And I think a lot of that is accessibility, right? Like we can see these guys play on ESPN Plus or whatever the network is. We have more access to their data. It's more readily available. And some of the challenges of just evaluating where guys are physically in the middle of not being fully grown yet the way that they are in college. So, what are some of the tendencies that you have or some things that you try to kind of keep front and center while you're evaluating prep players, given that they're still physically growing and developing? And tell us a little bit about your kind of approach to high school player evaluation. Let's say you're seeing a guy for the first time. What are some things that you key in on?
Yeah, I think the big thing is the mitigation of the risk, right? You watch college guys, they're closer to the big leagues, they're playing against each other. You have clean data. So it kind of makes it easier to evaluate. For the high school guys, hey, he might be a Minnesota kid. He only has 2 months to play season. Who is he playing against? Oh, this team was a bunch of 15-year-olds versus him as a senior. So like that can be difficult what the competition is, which is something to consider at all times, right? So a kid in Southern California who game in, game out is facing a top 2 rounder, it probably means a little bit more what his production level is, right? The results. And I think for the most part, a lot of the high school aspect is you don't want to just go based on results. It can't be results driven because they're not playing the top competition. Having said that, hitters do hit. Those guys who are good do still get hits. Walker Janik still hits 600 as a senior with a zillion walks. So like that's something you have to take into account. Guys do strike out a lot of guys. The top pitchers are going to have a lot of strikeouts. They're going to have low walks. So those first things you're looking for me as a high school guy is who's striking a lot of guys out, who has stuff that can get swings and misses. And then from there, becoming even more critical of who's getting those swings and misses in the zone. not a guy who's just getting a ton of chase on a breaking ball. It's bouncing against kids who are seeing breaking balls for the first time. So like that critiquing comes at that second level. But initially, the easiest way is who's running really fast, who's hitting the ball hard, right? Who's playing shortstop, center field, catching, who's pitching the first game for a team, and even beyond like the radar gun, who is collecting strikeouts, who's getting outs, who's not walking guys. So like that goes back 100 years, right? That's how you play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Now from there, diving into the tech, what are the characteristics of the fastball? How quick are the hands at the plate? What does this guy do defensively? So it all stems from there. But at the base level, like you guys know what you're looking for. Hey, that guy's good. Like you've seen it. Like everyone knows now. Why is he good? And can he be good and get better? Because for a guy, and I keep talking about Dason Hill because just so recently, but like you're looking at him in 6 years, right? Yeah, he hopefully breaks out at 21, 22. But when he's frontline starter, hoping to be a Cy Young, you're looking at a guy at 24. So when they were watching him this past spring at 17, you're envisioning him in 7 years. That's a long ways away. And honestly, he's very projectable. He's got a lot to add, but those are the things you're looking for.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're dropping these perfect segues in here, Shooter, because I want to ask you about that word specifically, projectability, because it is thrown around. I mean, almost with any prep pitcher that you care to name in the build up to a draft cycle, right? That has a little bit of height, that might be lighter build. And Dason Hill is an interesting example, right? Was he like 6'5", but like incredibly like skinny, whippy looking kid? How do you try and kind of glean how a player is going to develop physically? You mentioned that term of like 6-7 years, and what does projectability mean to you? Because I think, sometimes it's almost an overused word in evaluation particularly with prep pitchers.
Yeah, especially with the pitcher side of things, I think it still goes back to those wide, broad shoulders, high-waisted guys who have that kind of durability sense. But even more so for me, I always use the word aptitude is just such a key word. Does this guy have the ability to make changes? Is he receptive to changing things? Because obviously an 18-year-old pitcher is not going to go right to the big leagues. He has some things to learn. Is he going to be able to do it? And again, velocity, velocity does have its importance. It is still there because quantifiably, the higher you go, the more mistakes you can make, right? So like that's a baseline, but that can be taught. So how is this guy able to manipulate different pitches? I think that'll be a new wave of the game where guys already have 4 and 5 pitches. Hey, we can grab this. He already has the sense to, tweak things in game. Now let's kind of point him in the right direction and get him to raise that level of stuff. I think that's definitely coming from the pitching side for prep guys. And then hitting, like decision making is by far the most important thing. I talked with the driveline guys. I'm always conscious of hitters. What is the most difficult thing to hit or the most difficult thing to teach? Bat speed, you get stronger, you can teach all these things, but swing decisions and those decision making abilities, those are really difficult. And especially for a cold weather kid who's in high school, not having as many at bats as a Florida, Texas kid. Yes, there is a ton of upside. Like they may have a chance to get there. I think about like guys like Joe Mauer, where he was in Minnesota. Like he did not have many at bats. That's why he's a unicorn. Like his ability to have that strike zone awareness, the swing zone, even more to extent as a Canadian guy, like being able to do that is not something that happens all the time. So when you find those guys, they are just special. So I'm sure tech is trying to get closer to like evaluating, quantifying those decision-making characteristics, which you can still read, like how many strikeouts, how many whiffs in the zone we were talking about, walks, whatnot. But those are things for high school hitters. That is a seriously long-winded deep dive into my brain of what is going on in a quick instant when I'm watching a player. But those are just some of the things there.
Right. And I think, with high school guys too, if someone had the magic formula, there wouldn't be so many swings and misses, right? And you draft these high school guys, they don't pan out. Some guys go later, they pan out to be, the next big thing. So as we're talking about like the most recent draft, from your perspective, what were the strengths of the most recent draft class?
I would say the depth and the way I quantified it before the draft last year was there's not, and to put this in the football terms, there's not a ton of 5-star prep guys. There were kind of like 2 up front. Kid Connor Griffin, who actually was in the 2025 class and upclassed. He's just a specimen that you just don't see in our game very often. So it's a guy you got to go get that kid because he's just got tools that nobody else has. Bryce Rayner, they were kind of on the same level there. And then even pitching wise, it was more, hey, we can get depth later. So Dason was a key part of that where, hey, we're probably not going to go after this high school pitching up top early on. But once we get later into the draft, let's have some money left over because there's a ton of talent to be acquired. And I kept saying, what is the Napoleon quote of quantity has a quality all unto its own. So like grabbing a lot of those guys might be key. And the Guardians actually did it. They had a ton of money. They spread it out. They got some big time arms. They got a kid, Chase Mobley, in the 10th round. Who was a top 100 talent. So their ability to spread things out. Joey Oki was an Iowa kid from the prep side. They've done a really good job with pitchers. They attack those guys. But it was, especially compared to the 2025 draft, it was definitely down on the high school side in 23.
So as we talk about the high school arms, I think Jamie and I felt like there was a ton of really intriguing arms. You kind of mentioned that too. And those names kept tumbling down the board. Well, we saw college guys that maybe had bigger question marks, coming off injuries, didn't play at high levels, maybe didn't have much success. Those were the guys getting picked. Is this a trend that you see continuing as we progress through these draft cycles?
I'll be really curious. And this year, one of the top right-handed arms pulled his name on draft day. LSU kid, William Schmidt, and I don't know enough about it, but like NIL is coming into play. I mean, hands down, there's enough going on there, whether kids are getting insurance plans to go to school and pitch, do their thing. Now, I will say a kid like William Schmidt, who has that type of upside, may have been offered $3.5 million, but you're also eyeing, if you're the best guy out of LSU, you're looking at over $10 million. In 3 years. So an investment to go to school, go to Death Valley, watch football games all fall, try to win a national title. It's very alluring. I do think that's the baseball draft is so much different than the other ones because it's not drafting talent so much as it's accounting. So you have a finite, or not finite, but a draft pool that you're trying to stretch out some. It's just so much different, which is why you saw high school guys sink down, but still get paid probably considerably more than some of the other guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Schmidt. I actually specifically wanted to ask you about him and a couple of other names that we talk about so much on the build-ups to this podcast. Dax Whitney is a guy who popped up later in the cycle. Just not so common that you have a guy pitching in the middle of Idaho who's bringing people in from all over the country. And then Chris Lavonis was an interesting guy, one, because he was kind of a cheese ball of ours, I think, on this show. We really liked him. I do recall, Shooter, you tweeting out a bunch of Chris Lavonis looks at various points in the cycle. And, the Brewers, the last couple of cycles, have pursued this slightly more I'm going to call it risky because it seemed like it didn't quite work out as well this cycle, strategy of moving their money around really flexibly, right? So in 2023, they went under slot significantly and then ended up taking Batanti and Pratt and paying those guys way over slot. And they took a lot of prep guys this time, Lavonis being the one who didn't work out. Obviously, they got Message, who seems like a great arm too. But do you think NIL is going to impact the draft increasingly significantly? Or to kind of state that another way, did the number of higher profile prep arms who didn't sign this cycle surprise you? Or did you feel like that was kind of par for the course because there's always a few anyway?
I would say there's always a few. Lavonis definitely was a surprise based on where he was. And reports he turned down a lot of money. Reports Dax Whitney turned down a lot of money. So some kids just want to go to school, right? You guys want to college is fun. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. But to go back to the Brewers, I mean, getting a guy like Cooper Pratt, who is off to a stellar start, he's going. I mean, right now he looks like he was a stolen first round pick for them. But Tanti had a really nice August as well. And then I do think a team like the Brewers, right, a small market team similar to the Twins, finding those market inefficiencies. What are other teams not valuing? Can we find value there? What they're seeing is they're doing a great job with their pitching. They grabbed a ton of high school guys, even though Lavonis wasn't there. I think they got Joey Broughton. They got a kid Tyler Renz as well. Where let's see what we can make of these guys, and potentially where other teams are zigging will zag. So I think some teams will definitely do that from the prep pitching side. From the NIL perspective, it's hard to believe still that so much money is going to be invested into college baseball, just from the school side of things, with just how much college football is a driver. So like they're grabbing the mass chunks of those. But honestly, what a great time to be a kid in college. I mean, if I was in school, just to get a free dinner would have been awesome. But the fact if some guys are having yeah, they put $10,000 in my bank account this month. Wait, what? We can go to Costco like every day if that's the case. So I could see that. It's very alluring. I don't know the exact financials. If that starts to come up, then you might find more of a reason why. Oh yeah, it makes sense. This kid has a insurance plan plus $500,000 to go to school. I don't know. I'd do it probably.
Well, right, and I mean it's probably a lot easier to turn down $3.5 million if there's any incentive financially to do it.
Oh yeah.
In your day and age, you're saying you want a free lunch, or if you get a couple million, these kids are like, well, I can take a couple million, or I can take a couple million and go do the college thing. So, I mean, it's a crazy time because we're not that far removed from watching people get suspended for shoes, right? I mean, it's nuts.
Tattoos,
yeah.
Oh man.
It's and you know what, it's really good for the sport though. I will say, like, college baseball, I am a massive college baseball fan, all baseball, but to see what that sport has become, that people are committing some money to it. We have great coaches in the game who are driving eyes to it. If you look around the SEC, you had Tony Vitello winning it this year, who does such amazing work for college baseball. He helps drive up everybody. And then the Texas schools this year with Jim Schlossnagle going from A&M to UT and creating almost like an arms race down there. If there was ever a time to be a kid who was pinning NIL deals against NIL deals, having Texas and Texas A&M in a battle, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what that was like for agents.
And this is not something that I've ever even suggested, but do you think with Major League Baseball and owners, the way that they've behaved most recently we've contracted some minor league teams, we want to put less money into things, now we have to pay minor league players, is it maybe less of a big deal to the guys writing the checks if they're going to go to college and get paid? That's money that they're not paying anymore, right?
Yeah, I would say I always thought that the owners, when you watch in football, right, they have free minor leagues. Right. They get to watch those guys. I always thought, like, why would these MLB, with still college baseball is 11.7, why would they not try to fund that up while they were axing minor league team? Like, to me, it was like, you're already sending these guys, especially now, right to the bigs, right? There's 2 years, 1 year. We had how many guys this year who just Dylan Cruz, Wyatt Langford, all those guys are just flying up. Well, how about we invest a little more in the colleges? Now, the SEC has done it. I personally am rooting for the Big Ten to just like really go in on baseball. I wish it would happen because the Big Ten is such great fan base. And I mean, you guys are in the thick of it, like great baseball places. The Midwest is incredible baseball towns. Let's get the college baseball involved. So anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's an excellent conversation to have. Now, I haven't got into the 2025 stuff at all. Jamie's probably got a big board with 100 people, 200 people ranked. But how would you characterize next year's prep class? Even though we are early, we're not even into the fall seasons yet. How would you would you characterize that class, and how would you compare it to the most previous class in 2024?
I think it blows 2024 out of the water. There's some exciting athletes up the middle. There are marquee names at the top. You talk about Ethan Holiday, who is probably very much in the mainstream. He's got some other guys who are right around him, though. He's going to be a big name. He's helped carry the bullseye for this class, which makes what he's done even that much more remarkable, because it's not easy to do that. Seth Hernandez feels like one of those generational type pitchers, even though he's a right-hander, Jeremy, but he's up to 100 miles an hour. He can also hit. He's a really good athlete, great kid. We're already talking about just how high can a guy like Seth Hernandez go. Does he move into the Jackson Jobe consideration at like a number 3? We will see what happens next year. So like having those two guys early, the same way Max Clark and Walker, like having those guys to lean on so that you can get to a Colt Emerson and you can get to a Johnny Farmello and all those guys. But like there's a ton of depth. There's some good frontline guys, especially after Seth Hernandez. But the excitement of the shortstops, the outfielders, that's really what's going to help drive it. And it always helps having Ethan Holiday and the Holiday name at the top.
I gotta ask you about a couple of specific guys.
Bring it.
I saw a swing from Xavier Nyans at I think it was at the USA Baseball tryouts. Perhaps that was just otherworldly, and he feels like a guy who's maybe ascending a little bit already, up kind of towards the top of that first round conversation. Curious for your thoughts on him, and then I'm gonna hit you with one other guy I want to get your take on.
So I love Xavier. I'm obviously here in the Pacific Northwest. We just had him at our All-American game. I was blown away by the makeup, all the talking of. He did have some swing and miss this summer, which the scouting community is talking about. I am looking past that. Like I could not be. I have so many excuses for him on that front, and I think that he's going to be blown up next summer. Anything bad that you hear about Xavier next spring are likely teams picking from 15 to 30 who are trying to muddy the waters of the top half of the first round.
There you go. And then let me ask you about another Pacific Northwest guy then, because I feel like the Oregon area is just churning out freaky arms, and Cruz Schoolcraft is just a kind of an unbelievable look. It seems like if you're a hitter, I don't know how you pick up 6'8" coming at you from a weird angle from the left side. He feels like another guy that's going to get extremely famous very quickly. What's your take on him kind of early in the cycle?
And he's another one of those guys who actually is a 2026. He's up class, so a little bit younger, not too much. Also swings it well, like a good hitter who markets himself as a true two-way talent. I see he's in my backyard, so I would expect him to be close to up to 100 next year. It comes out really easy, really competes well. I saw him in the state semifinals this year. That was the best game I'd ever seen him throw. He got hit in the mouth late in the game after dominating, but bounced right back, which scouting wise, that's something you won't see much from him. Nobody's going to really do much to him next year. So having him work with some runners on, but like you said, 6'8" lefties don't grow on trees. It's definitely a bigger frame. There's a lot to work with there, but there are some really talented lefties in this class that I think the industry is going to get really excited about.
Right on. Shooter, let me ask you one more before we let you go here. Jeremy and I always like to do kind of like, who are your guys going into draft classes, right? So maybe like guys a little bit further down the board, guys who haven't ascended yet, maybe guys who people aren't talking about yet, that kind of, for whatever reason, whether it's a data point, a look, a gut feeling, whatever it is, they're kind of our guys. Curious if there are a couple of names, maybe like one hitter and one pitcher, who you think draft nicks should look out for on the prep side, not way down the board, but maybe just who have folks not heard about yet, who they're definitely gonna know by the time we get to the draft next summer.
I think Braden Jackson is a guy in Northern California, catcher, outfielder, who, I mean, is with Team USA. I don't think the industry was as strong on him as we are. I'd expect him to continue to grow. Northern California has routinely churned out absolute dudes. So I think he will continue to go. If you wanted, I'm really big on cold weather guys right now, like you talked about there. We had a ton of lot of success the past couple of years, Midwest, Northeast, Pacific Northwest. I think that Jaden Fauske, an Illinois kid, can really hit. I think whoever gets him, wherever he lands, is going to be very, very happy with what they get. And then I'll give you a couple just on the top, because we talked about Seth Hernandez. He has two teammates who are also top 10 prospects for us. So I think Billy Carlson and Brady Ebels, but Brady, there's probably the biggest sleeper, because Billy Carlson is essentially Bryce Terang, but right-handed hitter. So very similar to that, can really pick it. He was awesome at our All-American game. I think he's really pushed himself in the first round consideration. And then Brady Ebels, one of the younger players in the class, I think he's just going to continue to rise throughout the spring. So that's me trying to stop myself at like 4 or 5 because they're all like ultra familiar to me. But those are kind of names where I feel like they're famous in my head, but like I don't think they're probably famous enough just yet.
Yeah, I love it. Perfect. And hey, Shooter, if schedules allow, we'd love to do this again in the springtime, as we actually really get into the thick of the 25 cycle.
For sure. This has been awesome, guys. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for your time. Shooter, last thing I want to ask you before we let you go here, where can people find you? Because for me, and I know for Jeremy, you are an absolutely invaluable source of looks for draft nerds like ourselves. And then you also have a really great podcast. So I want to give you a second to put the word out there about that so people can check it out.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, check out prepbaseball.com for all the news and events coming out from our company, at Shooter Hunt at Twitter. We also have a podcast called The War Room with former Marlins scouting director DJ Civilic and I, just really kind of getting behind the curtains of real draft talk, not the kind of buttoned up stuff, more so like this is what to expect here. This is where this guy can go. This is what teams are looking for. So it's a really awesome project we're doing there. Also, please check out our Prep Baseball YouTube channel. I've been adding some stuff on there. So keep an eye out for a lot of draft content and kind of some quick hits on there.
Awesome. Well, we'll let you go, Shooter. Thanks so much for joining us, man. And we'll have to have you back on again sometime soon.
Awesome. Hopefully we'll see the Twins in October.
Amen. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Shooter.
See you guys.
All right, there he goes. Shooter Hunt. Man, that was awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah. Love having great guests on the show. Yeah, that was a rad conversation. I wasn't expecting bonus nuggets on Twins draft picks from the 2024 draft, so I love affirmations, man. Jeremy, before we wrap up here, I know we're not, this was going to be like a time dependent piece, but we got to talk about Derek Bender, man.
Yeah.
So let's quit. I'm going to just 30 seconds recap this story. And then I want to get your honest takes and thoughts about how this went down. Did the Twins do the right thing? How bizarre of a situation is this? So Derek Bender, Twins 6th round pick, signed out of Coastal Carolina, someone who was on the consensus big board, signed for around $315,000, so not an inconsequential pick or an inconsequential sum of money, was cut by the Twins last week when it was reported that in an elimination game, he told opposing hitters what pitch was coming because he, quote, according to the story, wanted to go home. Apparently the Lakeland Flying Tigers, which is the low A affiliate of the Detroit Tigers, their coaching staff alerted the Twins coaching staff. He was cut by the organization a few days ago, made massive waves on social media. If you look back at the pitching line for Ross Dunn, who's a lefty who's been with Fort Myers all season, he really got blown up in that game. I think it was like 1.2 innings, 5 earned. It did not go well, and that was a game that eliminated Fort Myers from playoff contention. So have you ever seen or heard anything like this in all of your time following baseball, man? What's your take on this?
No, I haven't. I don't. I guess I feel like the way he felt, like I just want my season to be over. That's probably not a super uncommon feeling.
For sure.
Just looking at his page, the Coastal Carolina season started February 16th and ran till June 2nd. And then he joined Fort Myers in August. So, I mean, he had a little bit of time off and played his last game, a week and a half ago. But looking back prior to that, season started in the middle of February in 2023. He played that season till the beginning of June and then turned around and played in the Cape Cod League. So this isn't like it was an extended season any more than he's done before. Again, I don't think it's uncommon at some, even if you're a baseball player, you love playing baseball, to think, man, when the season's over, I'll get, to take a break. The way he did it, it ain't the right way to do it. Like you're not throwing baseball games. And so the fact that it was a minor league game, for as much as it was talked about, if that's a Major League Baseball game, like the amount of money that people lose or the amount of money that swings, like people aren't betting on single low A baseball. I don't know that you can. You probably can if you know the right place to look.
Offshore bookies.
But I mean, you didn't get into the tiptoeing around the legality of things.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a bad look. My guess is that when he did it, he didn't consider at all the consequences. Probably didn't think it was ever going to get out, and it seemed to surface pretty quickly. And then the Twins made a quick and the correct decision to just move on from him, and that's a reputation thing that's never going. He's never going to escape. And so I would be very, very surprised if he got another chance anytime soon in organized professional baseball, because man, it ain't a good look.
Yeah, man, I think all your points are valid, right? Like, agree with you on pretty much all of that. No one is saying that you can't be sick and tired of baseball season. I bet 99% of guys are by the end of it. No one cares really in the grand scheme of things about the outcome of a minor league game or about who advances or not to the minor league playoffs. What I do struggle with is the Ross Dunn aspect of this. This is a guy's career, and Ross Dunn has not had a great season at Fort Myers, and he's trying to finish out on a strong note. Like, you are messing with someone's career, and I just don't think he had a viable future with the Twins. I mean, I'm so open to hearing what Derek Bender's side of the story is here, but if you're a pitcher in the Twins organization, would you ever feel 100% confident throwing to him if he was still in the organization? Right?
No, and that's why you have to get rid of him, because in baseball, when you're spending every day, minor league baseball too. I mean, you're spending every day. You're spending road trips. You're spending all of your time. Like, if you can't trust the guy, which nobody's going to, and I don't know. Obviously, the Twins know about Ross Dunn and why things didn't go well that game, right? And he didn't have a great season, but I don't think anybody's going to look at that and say, "Oh man, that ERA balloon," and not understand that there was a reason that last game happened. So, but so much in baseball is a mental thing, and if you lose confidence because you're getting rocked, even though it's not necessarily your fault, that's sometimes a hard thing to get back. So
yeah,
it certainly impacted him. It impacted the offensive guys that were now knowing what was coming, right? Because that's not a true representation of who they are as a hitter. I mean, it's batting practice. So it's a bad look, and I think that the only thing that makes it a little easier to handle is that the Twins just made that call. The part that is interesting, though, with everybody the Twins draft, I mean, the underlying thing is high character guys. Like this is a miss, or it's a a complete out of character move.
Yeah.
But it's like this is something that I feel like
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, like, I agree that that's how it reads, right? Undeniably, it's like, oh, like that decision is kind of dissonant with being a good teammate. But then you've had guys, Peyton Eels, for example, I saw, who's now with the Saints, was a college teammate of Bender's, tweeted almost immediately after he was released, Derek Bender's one of the best teammates I ever had. Da 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 da.
Oh,
I
really?
agree. Yeah, he did. I agree, and I think Nick Lucky maybe was a college teammate of his too, who's with the Miracle, or with Cedar Rapids. I agree that it reads that way. I just think maybe it was a complete freak incident, thing, decision, impulse, whatever, that he did not think about, did not think through the consequences of. How could you possibly surface that something like that would happen in your time spent doing your due diligence before drafting a guy?
Right. No, and I don't disagree with that at all. The other thing is, how often do catchers try to mess with hitters and tell them a pitch is coming? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like that would be a pretty, maybe not common thing, but you get a guy on his heels one time, and all of a sudden you're suggested another curveball's coming, and then the fastball goes by you, and it's like, sorry, pal. Right. I would guess that there's some chess being played behind the plate with some of these catchers, and knowing the hitters and just trying to mess with them a little bit. But
Yep.
I'd be really curious more of what those conversations were, because the umpire's hearing them too, right? I mean, not that
You
the
would
umpires
think.
say anything, but it's like the whole thing just reads as a very weird.
Very weird.
And
Very,
the Twins, the best they could do by just cutting their
yeah,
ties and moving on.
I'd agree. But yeah, I wanted to cover that while it was still relevant. A number of people reached out and said, "What on earth? Never seen anything like it. Don't think I'll ever see anything like it again." Jeremy, anything else you want to cover today before we call it a night here, man?
Well, the late season promotions from
Late season promotions.
Double A to Triple A, I think
That's right.
are unique, right? Because Triple A is what's left, and now we see some guys that I think we didn't anticipate seeing.
Yeah.
And then Jorge Alcala getting sent down again.
Okay.
Like,
all right, let's talk about let's do the promotions. Actually, let's talk about Alcala first, so we can finish on a positive. Alcala sent down again. I know he's been terrible. I just don't know what the Twins think that he is. Like,
right.
He had a portion of the year where he was throwing 2 innings at a time, something he clearly didn't do very well.
Correct.
He had a period of the year where he threw 1 inning at a time in a somewhat leveraged role really well, like that chunk of time where he's up to like 99, 100, everything was looking great. Then he completely fell apart. I think he's been sent down 3 times over the course of this season. I don't think the Twins think he's very good. But maybe I'm misreading that. What do you think that they think of Alcala or think he is?
Well, I think the reality is it doesn't matter what the Twins think, because publicly it appears that the Twins don't think he's very good, and that's what he's going to believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting yo-yoed around, coming back off of almost missing a whole year, and then getting immediately thrown into throwing 2 innings at a time. Like, there's no Twins fan anywhere that was like, oh, this usage makes sense.
Yeah.
And so he was bad lately, but I mean, this is the precursor to he's not on the roster anymore.
Right.
And that's a hard one.
Let me ask you this then. How do you parse this? Because this is something I've really been struggling with. The Tigers traded their second best starter, Jack Flaherty, who are now half a game behind the Twins, who did nothing at the deadline. That's not great. The Twins bullpen is just so constantly taxed, because we talked about this, I think, a week or so ago, just offhandedly. 3/5 of the rotation are giving you a max of 5 innings, and usually somewhere between 3 and 5. And so you have a bullpen that's going like 4 to 6 every single night, and it's not that good to begin with, because after Jackson, Duran, and Sands, who do you have that you really, really trust? So here's my question, Jeremy. Stewart's been injured. Topa's been injured. I'm missing other guys, I'm sure. Did the Twins do a bad job of bullpen construction, or have they just gotten incredibly unlucky this season to be missing like even one more guy who could pitch in like kind of leverage would be a huge deal for this team, I feel like.
Well, I think it's more the unlucky, because you only mentioned bullpen guys that are out. You didn't mention the starting rotation guys that are out. And I think that moves guys around too. Like if Paddock is healthy, if Joe Ryan is healthy, if the dude from the beginning of the year, the DeSclafani or whatever his name was, like it gives you the ability to move guys to other types of roles where not necessarily Zebby Matthews, but a type of pitcher, like when Louis Varland was able to be moved to the bullpen. Yep. You would have that option with a couple of guys in your rotation if you didn't have that. And that's not to say you just move that guy, but you look at at what you need and say, hey, maybe this guy can get it done. The trade for Richards was, but like a lot of the data suggested that he wasn't going to be horrible.
I don't know about that.
It's so hard to invest in relievers when it's the sample small and it's only going to be small. And Duran has struggled a little bit. I mean, Jax has been great, but not great enough to get through the other inning the other night, right? Sands has been a revelation, even though I've questioned for 3 years how he makes an opening day roster.
He's been so good.
Better. Thielbar was really good last year and was really bad, but the other lefty was Funderburk, and he's been hurt. Hedrick was a piece, and he's not really in the conversation. Yep. So when it comes to stuff like that, I feel like it's hard to place blame, because the organization's done a good job of developing. They've done a good job of targeting Pablo Lopez in a trade. And so I do think that it's mostly luck, bad luck. But they haven't done themselves any favors by unearthing guys that have been super, super good. I mean, Brock Stewart hurt. But I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I do think that what the organization's done developmentally has been better than it has been for a long, long time.
Yep, I agree with that. Look at, you're so positive today. Look at you, whole new Jeremy. A caller brings out the positive side in you. Okay, let's talk about the promoted guys. Very nice. Is that your outfit for the Century Club or whatever it's called in the fancy Centerfield Suites? Is that what you wear? Your fancy college shirt?
I wore a free T-shirt when I went to the fancy.
Okay, let's talk about the promoted guys. We touched on this last week when we started at the top of the org with Walker Jenkins getting 6 games in Double-A. Great reward for a great season. Got off to a solid start there. Corey Lewis and Marco Raya are coming up, have been promoted to the Saints for the last week of the season. In a second, we're going to get Theo on here just to give some perspective, because he talked to both of these guys today. Couldn't be better timing. Let's quickly run through some data here, just to kind of put their the second half of their seasons in context. So Corey Lewis, kind of forgotten man this season a little bit, because he missed the time at the beginning of the year with a shoulder issue, I believe. Last 12 starts at Double-A, 2.59 ERA, 3.37 xFIP, striking out just under 30% of hitters. I think the walks are the concern there. It's 11.4%. It's a little bit too high. Super excited that he is a Triple-A, because you're going to get the data on the knuckleball, which is awesome. Marco Raya, who I feel like is the most complained about pitcher in the Twins minor league system by people who followed the Twins minor league system. Last 6 starts at AA, 153 ERA, 314 FIP, giving up just a 502 OPS against in that span. Both up to make one start with the Saints, I think it sounds like, before the end of the season. Theo, why don't you hop on and let us know your thoughts after you talked to them today, I think.
No, I mean, they are just kind of shocked to be here in the first place because they were expecting to finish their seasons in AA. And I also need to say Jalen Nolan, who joined the team a little bit earlier than them on Friday, he was expected to pitch the finale for the win surge on Sunday, but he was out for a relief outing here tonight, and he had another outing here too. So, I mean, it's an adjustment for Nolan in the bullpen because he's used to being a starter of late. And, he said, just talking to him a few minutes ago here, one thing he's really been thankful to be getting better at is his composure when things are not going well for him the mound. But obviously Nolan is not who we're here to talk about, but I still want to plug just because that conversation is fresh, and then he shouldn't be overlooked because I think even if he's not going to be a starter long term, he's still someone to be a valuable long reliever. And as a lefty, the Twins definitely need someone like that if Caleb Thielbar might not be around too much longer in the longevity of this team. So back to Lewis and Raya, as I said, they're both unexpectedly here. Lewis said the thing he really is hoping to work on, finish the season strong is that fastball velocity, because that's kind of fallen back as everyone has, been hyper focused on his knuckleball. And he's like very well aware, that he's kind of leading this new age renaissance on the pitch, because the last guy to really be dominant with the knuckleball in Major League Baseball was R.A. Dickey. And I don't think there's really been too many guys to throw that pitch since his retirement. So I know, what's the Padres pitcher again? The Twins faced him and batted
Matt Waldron, I think.
Yeah, he's like the only guy who's really been throwing it this year. So maybe next year, Lewis and a few other guys coming up through the minor leagues could be, a part of this new age group of knuckleballers who are just doing a lot more different with the pitch compared to what we've traditionally seen. And obviously Lewis is at the forefront of that. And, I did ask Raya about, his frustrations, if he has any with, his innings limits, because I've made my frustrations clear about that. I know I'm a part of, the gripes when it comes to how they babied him. But he said, a lot of that's been more them trying to take things easy with the injuries he's faced as he's been developed since they drafted him in 2020. And, when you hear it from the player directly, it does give you that new perspective of no, they know their own body the best. And obviously we're always watching these guys from afar. I mean, rarely do we get down to Cedar Rapids, but mostly I'm here. I know a few other people at Twins Daily, at all these other sites, get around on occasion. So when they're here in St. Paul and you get to see it firsthand, it really does give you that new perspective. And you're not just looking at, the box scores, what the numbers are saying, if they're getting StatCast data, if, in the case of them being down to Fort Myers or here in St. Paul. So I think it's just good, there's just this collective of guys, and I think it's very fair to say, the next wave of the pitching pipeline is ending their season here in St. Paul, and I think that's a big credit. And I know, obviously, Andrew Morris, Lewis, and Raya are the forefront of this, but also Travis Adams and Jalen Nolan can't be forgotten about, because, again, if they're not guys who are potentially going to be starters long term, they can still be developed into good bullpen weapons. And then, getting to see that here to end the year in St. Paul while things are slipping away for the Twins, it's a nice breather. I mean, they lost bad here tonight, 10-2, so it's not like I saw any better baseball, but it's like they're not playing so much for the AAA playoffs. They've been eliminated for that. So you're really just seeing these guys development-wise, and, you're trying to get a more of a scouting eye test on what they can do to contribute if they are on the 40-man roster and if they're needed in these last 10 games for the Twins, or just, what the future has to hold.
Yeah, and the thing with Raya, too, because it is frustrating. Like, he threw 60 innings in 2023. He threw 65 innings in 2022. He's up to 92 this year. But I think back to Bailey Ober. Like, Bailey Ober didn't throw hardly at all. So he was drafted out of the College of Charleston in 2017, threw 80 some innings that year combined. In 2018, he threw 75 innings. In 2019, he threw 78 innings. And this is at an older age than Raya. 2020 obviously didn't throw. He came back in 2021 and threw 108. And this year he's at 161. So it's like, sometimes you hear about that build-up where it's like, we're not going to increase by more than 20%. Obviously, we don't know what Ober did in 2020. I'm assuming he was at at the comp at St. Paul in that alternate group throwing.
Probably.
But it's like I feel like the Twins have a pretty good idea. And who knows, Marco Raya could throw 140 innings next year at AAA and be a guy that's very available for the Twins. And without having a lot of really feeling like why the heck did we treat him with kid gloves here? Well, he was 19 and 20, right? He's 21 years old right now, and he's approaching 100 innings for the year. So for me, it's kind of the balance of things. I love the fact that they're bringing him up to get another start. I saw one team had their AFL roster.
Yeah, Doogie reported Ben Ross is the only confirmed guy so far for the Twins going. I think those should be coming out, and hopefully that's something we can look over next week if they're all out, and at least highlight the Twins guys. And Brewers and Cubs, can't forget about them. But I think, and also in comparison, going back to Bailey Ober, they, took him a lot easier with his workload when he's, a year or two older in his development, compared to where Marco Raya was, because he was 25 when he debuted, and Raya could probably debut at 23 years old, and he just turned 22 in August. So, if things go well, if he's healthy enough, they start working him. Obviously, in April, no matter where he's starting, he's going to be on a 5 innings a start limit, and then they're going to ramp him up, and hopefully by the middle of the summer, we can start seeing more 6-7 inning outings from him.
He'll debut next year.
Yeah,
I don't. You would think, right?
I mean, if he doesn't start the season here, then he's definitely going to be here in May. I mean, they have so many guys to work with. We just don't know what the layout's going to be of who's starting where.
It would shock me to promote him at the end of the season.
Yeah, no way.
And then
no. I mean, honestly, if we're just looking at it on paper right now, Andrew Morris is dead set to be here next year. I would say Lewis, Raya, Adams and Nolan could lean either way. They're the two who are more likely, like they might start the season in Wichita, but like I just said about Raya, they could be up here in St. Paul a month or two later, depending how their season's going. And I think Zebby is likely to start the season here as well, just because of his results. I mean, he's gone through such a rush to get to the majors, and it's all worked out very well. And his last outing was decent and a lot better compared to what we've seen from him, but I absolutely would not be surprised if he's starting the season here in St. Paul, because he had great success, got rushed up a little bit, but didn't have a horrible outing. He wasn't looking like Jose Barrios in his rookie year, so there's a lot to positive work with, but I would not surprise me if he is the shorter straw in his back here.
Yeah, agreed. To summarize, mid to long term of the Twins, mid to long term future of the Twins pitching, feeling a lot better than the immediate short term. I think we can all agree. All right, guys, we'll call it a day there because we just passed the hour mark. Super fun conversation. Thank you guys for taking time to check out the show. You can support us by downloading the show on your preferred podcast platform of choice. You can check out all of our episodes and all of our content on YouTube at Destination The Show. If you want to get in touch with us, you can also shoot us an email, destinationtheshow@gmail.com. We will be back next week, hopefully, as Theo mentioned, to talk through AFL roster selection and dig back into that Twins end of season wrap up. Until then, we'll catch you next time. Hope the Twins can make the playoffs.